Thanks very much, Ruth. I was a dreadful whip and regret my time in the whip's office. One of the things that is often not stated in debates about democracy, which is the core of the argument about whether our country should be in the European Union or not, is a belief that evidence and argument should win eventually. I believe that, and I think, having heard, I'm the representative of the fourth political party to take the platform here. I think the arguments are extremely powerful, and I feel more optimistic by the day that we will win. And I suppose it comes to my task to say why the Labour Party isn't fully and enthusiastically behind what are deep, democratic, powerful and persuasive arguments. I think, having spent much of the last 6 months debating within the Labour Party, there are two big reasons. Well, there's a relatively trivial reason and one very big reason that is making it difficult for the Labour Party to support the Brexit campaign. I think there are probably about 24 Labour MPs who are supporting exit at the moment. Why is that? The first and trivial reason is Tony Blair switched off the debate about the European Union in the early 90s. He decided, possibly correctly at the time, that debating the European Union was bad electorally, and one thing one can't say about Tony Blair was that he was poor at winning elections. He was actually very good at winning elections. But it is now, sadly, the state, when I go around to constituency Labour parties or trade unions and debate the issue, one is debating against people who haven't thought about the issue, and they should have done in some cases, and haven't debated it. And I can give you two recent examples from debates, and you will not believe it, Nigel might, but the first case, a Labour MEP in a debate said, we cannot leave the European Union because of all the money the European Union invests in the Northwest. And there was shock when I pointed out for every facility that you see the 12 stars on, we could have had 2 plus, actually, if we'd not been in the European Union, because we are spending 100 billion a parliament for being a member of the EU, and we're getting a relatively small percentage of that back. The other argument, because the trade union movement is worried about TTIP, I was told by another elected Labour representative that if we left the European Union, TTIP would still apply to us. Well, it's just crazy. I just give those arguments, or those points, to show what a hurdle of education we have to get over. But there is a bigger, and this is the profound point, I suppose, where those of us in the Labour Party and outside have to make the argument. I mean, it would be extraordinary for the giants of the Labour movement over the last 50 or 60 years, from Gaitskell to Benn or Castle or Foote, not to take the line that has been taken by all politicians of the left since the Enlightenment, that the essence of democracy is that you can throw out the people who make your laws. That is the essence of democracy, as the Americans said in 19th century elections, throw the rascals out. And if you can't do that, you don't have a democracy. And can there be anything more insulting to our parliamentary democracy than a Prime Minister who comes back and declares that he's got a major victory, because if we get the Slovenians and the Lithuanian parliaments and the German parliaments and God knows how many other parliaments, then we may be able to ask the Commission to think again. It's an insult to British democracy. So That would have been common in the Labour Party, but what has actually happened is, going back to Delors speaking to the Trade Union Congress in 1988, he persuaded the trade union movement and much of the Labour Party that the European Union, the common market as it was then, was actually a progressive social democratic project where the left would always be in control, and that they could swap democracy in here, they could push some of it away, and they would get a permanent victory there. I mean, in principle, that's a bad thing, but in practice, the members of the Labour Party, the left generally, have become blind to what is actually going on. And I think, in this sense, what was said earlier about Greece is beginning to open eyes. What you have is the political project being protected at the centre, at the expense not just of the Greeks actually, but the whole of youth across Portugal, Spain, Italy, Cyprus, Greece. How can a Labour Party, a Labour movement, support a project that means that there is 50% unemployment in those countries amongst young people? And if we focus on Greece, where trade union rights have been removed, democratic rights have been removed, effectively, the most left-wing government ever elected in Europe is being simply there to carry out the policies of the European Central Bank. That is not democracy. And I think there one can begin to see members on the left looking again. There are lots of other places that they can look to see that what they thought was a project of the left is not. It's a project of a centralised bureaucracy which is not under democratic control. I will give just two other examples which I think I hope my colleagues in the Labour Party and the trade union movement will listen to. One is, if Labour members are stuck within our own meetings for defending the last Labour government, we say, and we persuaded the Conservative Party that it was a good thing eventually, we go to the minimum wage. That was a good thing. There was a big fight in Parliament about it, and now it's a consensus. In fact, the Conservatives are trying to outbid us on the minimum wage. There have been two judgments by the European Court of Justice, the Viking judgment and I've forgotten its name now, but there's another judgment as well about the minimum wage and the right of the European Court of Justice to involve themselves in industrial disputes. And in essence what it says is that if you're a business operating in two countries, then you can undermine the minimum wage in the country with a higher minimum wage. And that is a fundamental interference in the decisions made by the Swedish government and the Finnish government in those two cases. And the final point I would bring people's attention to is, when I go to these debates, I'm told, well, the European Union is wonderful in terms of the environment. We would not have had clean beaches if it wasn't for the European Union. Well, this country has a very long record of clean air and good environmental legislation, and could just as easily have passed legislation to clean up our own beaches. But actually, the EU's record on the environment isn't as good as they pretend it is. If we go to the point that David Davis was making about Volkswagen, Volkswagen will be taken to court and fined in the United States. The capitalist United States will take them to the cleaners, I think. In the European Union, they will get away with it. We had on the Transport Select Committee, we had the chief executive of Volkswagen UK behind. He said, we are in compliance with EU regulations, and he may well be right, because Volkswagen and BMW have managed to manipulate the rules and environmental regulations on emissions from exhaust to their own advantage. So if anybody is telling you that the European Union has a great record on the environment, point them to Volkswagen. And the final point I would make in this great debate that we're going to have about the European Union is the project fear. There are risks both ways. Any sensible person can see there are risks in coming out. None of us know what's going to happen simply because we will be creating our own, or we will be grasping back our own democracy, and David's party might win, my party might win. We have a different view of where the world will be in future, so nobody can be absolutely certain about that. But the real risk is if we stay in, we have played our best card. That actually, whatever the rules are, the interests of the Eurozone will be paramount in the future of the EU, and our interests will not be. So it is vital that we win this referendum. Thank you.